I left for 2 days, came back, and there was a full-on wedding happening in my backyard with a sign on my fence that said happily ever after, Karen and Doug. Karen hosted her wedding in my garden, so I installed motion-activated sprinklers. Part 1. The stiletto in the petunias and the bagel that hit the floor. I was mid-bite into a toasted bagel, humming to myself, flipping through an old gardening magazine, when I saw it, a stiletto. Just one, sticking out of my petunias like some sort of bridal crime scene. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and saw the rest of it. A wedding arch, in the middle of my backyard. Folding chairs lined up in crooked rows, pink ribbons on everything, and confetti tangled in my prized rosemary bush like someone tried to decorate it with a leaf blower. Then I saw the sign, tacked right onto my fence, sparkling in glitter and pure audacity. Happily ever after, Karen and Doug. That was the moment my bagel hit the floor, and my blood pressure hit the ceiling. My home had always been my sanctuary. After retiring early to escape the madness of the city, I had poured my savings, my sweat, and my soul into transforming this neglected yard into a peaceful oasis. Roses, trimmed hedges, koi pond, a small reading gazebo. Even my cat Steve had his own sunning rock. But now, that sanctuary had been hijacked by Karen. Karen, who had only moved in 3 months ago, was already the queen of unsolicited HOA suggestions and unsolicited visits. Her voice carried like a foghorn in a wind tunnel. Her sunglasses were the size of small satellites, and she once leaned over my fence just to ask why I wasn't doing more for the community. I told her I moved here for peace, not politics. She smiled like she'd bitten into a lemon and said, "Oh, that's cute. But this wasn't cute. This was war, with a wedding arch." Part 2. The confetti crime scene and the photo that broke me. I didn't move. Just stood there, barefoot, in my own backyard, trying to process the floral fever dream I'd come home to. 2 days. I'd been gone for 2 days. A quick visit to my sister's house. Came back Sunday evening thinking I'd sip tea under the gazebo and water the roses. Instead, my koi pond was filled with plastic champagne flutes. A folding chair had been knocked into the water, half submerged like a drunken guest gave up halfway through a toast. Rose petals, hundreds, were ground into the lawn like someone had tried to bury the evidence of a love crime. And then, taped to my back door, was the final insult. A photo. Karen, beaming in a blinding white dress, arm in arm with some guy I assumed was Doug, right under my gazebo. On the back, a handwritten note in pink glitter pen that read, "Thanks for the space. You saved our big day. K." I stared at it, then at the wreckage, then back at the note. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or laugh like a lunatic in a sitcom no one was watching. Even my cat Steve padded out, took one look at the petal-stained grass, and immediately threw up on a discarded boutonniere. He got it. I stormed back inside, paced the hallway for an hour, running through every possible legal move, every revenge fantasy, every petty option involving glitter and loudspeakers. But then it hit me. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I needed to plan. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It's precise. It's quiet. It's cold. Like the water that would soon be blasting Karen's brunch guests directly in their sequined sundresses. And that was when the sprinkler idea was born. Part 3. The blueprint, the bagel, and the birth of a sprinkler trap. The next morning, I didn't even finish my coffee. I marched straight into the local hardware store like a man possessed. The teen behind the counter barely had time to say, "Good morning," before I dropped my list on the counter. Motion-activated sprinklers, infrared sensors, camouflaged nozzles, waterproof speaker system, and one extremely unamused glare. He blinked. Raccoons? I looked him dead in the eye and replied, B. No. Worse. Entitled people in heels. 4 hours later, I was elbow-deep in soil, digging trenches along the garden perimeter like I was prepping for a tiny suburban war. Every nozzle was hidden with surgical precision, each wire tucked away like a secret booby trap, each sensor calibrated to detect movement in zones Karen loved to invade. I tested them, walked into the danger zone in my oldest hoodie, just to be sure. The blast hit me square in the chest. I staggered back, dripping wet, my glasses askew, and I laughed like a supervillain in a rom-com no one had asked for. Perfect. Now, all I had to do was wait. Because Karen, she thought I'd roll over. She thought I'd just sweep up the confetti, cry over trampled roses, and go back to sipping tea like a defeated little garden gnome. But no. I had declared war, and my soldiers were sprinkler heads, locked, loaded, and ready to rain hell on high heels. Part 4. The Tour, the Trespass, and the Sprinkler Symphony. It didn't take long. By Saturday morning, I heard it. That unmistakable click-clack of stilettos strutting down Karen's patio like she was the mayor of brunch. I peeked through the blinds, and there she was, dressed like she was headed to a vineyard in Tuscany instead of the HOA war zone she'd created. Beside her, 3 women, all sipping sparkling something, giggling too loudly, and swaying like they'd pre-gamed with Prosecco and delusion. Karen waved her arms in grand arcs, giving a full-blown garden tour from her side of the fence like it was a real estate open house. "This spot?" she purred, gesturing toward my koi pond. "Perfect for a bridal photo shoot." I clenched my mug so hard the handle nearly snapped off. Then it happened. One of the ladies, wearing a wide hat and 0 cents, wandered too close to the side gate. The latch creaked. She pushed, and just like that, she stepped in. Onto my lawn, onto the freshly raked mulch I just repaired after Karen's first backyard massacre. The motion sensor blinked to life, and then FSSA blast of cold, high-pressure water slammed her straight in the hip. She shrieked. Her mimosa flew. Her hat went airborne like a flamingo in a wind tunnel. "Oh my God, what is happening?" she screamed, spinning to flee. Right into a second sprinkler blast aimed perfectly at the ankles. She slipped, face first, into the mud. The other guests gasped. Karen screamed. And like dominoes in wedge heels, chaos erupted. Karen bolted through the open gate, arms flailing like a scarecrow in a hurricane. Too late. The next zone activated. Direct hit. Water drenched her head to toe in 3 seconds flat. Her expensive blouse, now see-through. Her lashes, sliding down her cheeks. And that smug confidence, melting faster than cheap frosting in July. I sipped my tea from the window. Did I laugh? Number, I cackled. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was art. Part 5. The pink letter, the paper war, and the HOA checkmate. By that afternoon, Karen had dried off, physically, not emotionally. I knew because a new envelope appeared in my mailbox. Pink, perfumed, and labeled in gold cursive like it came from a wedding planner, not a neighbor who just got blasted off my lawn like a raccoon at a car wash. I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in swirly font so dramatic it looked like a Shakespearean breakup note. To whom it may concern. You have created an emotionally hazardous environment. Several innocent guests endured trauma by water. We request immediate removal of the devices, or we will escalate this to the HOA board and seek legal action. She signed it. With hope for harmony, Karen. I nearly snorted my tea, because she had no idea. I'd already prepared my response. The next morning, I dropped a folder in her mailbox. Neat, simple, thorough. Inside, a printout of the municipal trespassing laws. A screenshot of her wedding post, yes, still up, tagged with my backyard in the background. A copy of the permit for motion-activated sprinklers as pest deterrents. And, best of all, security camera stills of her guests, trespassing, slipping, and running for their lives. Oh, and one final touch. A sticky note that read, "Please keep your events in your own yard." I didn't hear a peep for 2 days. But on the third day, Karen rose again. This time, she went full public relations mode. Set up a brunch. On her lawn, mind you, complete with croissants, sparkling cider, and gossip louder than a leaf blower at 6 a.m. She wore a massive sun hat, told guests some people just don't understand community joy, and glanced dramatically toward my house every 5 minutes like she was performing in an off-Broadway tragedy titled, Sprinkled and Silenced. But I didn't bite. I didn't argue. I just smiled from behind my curtain, because while Karen played victim on her lawn, the internet was about to make her famous. Part 6. Viral Karma, the Sprinkler sequel. And a meme is born. The first video surfaced that evening, a 32-second clip, grainy footage, probably from someone at Karen's brunch. The caption? Entitled neighbor gets blasted by motion sprinklers in a wedding dress? And there she was, Karen in all her soaked glory, screaming, slipping, mascara running down like a melted villain. Captured in full suburban slow-mo. By morning, 20,000 views. By lunch, 200,000. Comments poured in. She turned someone's backyard into a chapel and caught the baptism too. Play stupid games. Win garden hose prizes. Bro's got the Avengers-level defense system? My favorite. Sprinkler Bride has entered the chat. Karen? Not amused. She stormed onto the neighborhood Facebook group with a post so long it could have been a novel. To those circulating unauthorized content of a private moment during a spiritual celebration, please be advised I am considering legal action for emotional damages caused by violent irrigation and hostile landscaping devices. I choked on my tea. Violent irrigation? That's when I knew. Karen had officially lost the plot. And yet, she wasn't done. 2 days later, I heard hammering, peered out the window. She was putting up signs, big green banners tied to her fence. Save the gardens. Say no to weaponized water. I almost applauded, because this wasn't a retreat. It was a rebrand. Karen was turning her personal humiliation into a full-on neighborhood awareness campaign. And honestly, I was impressed. Unhinged? Yes. Delusional? Obviously. But committed? Oh, absolutely. So I grabbed some popcorn, because round 2 was coming with banners, a podium, and a garden hose waiting for vengeance. Part 7, Karen's Garden Protest, and the Sprinkler Symphony. Saturday morning came with a bang, literally. I woke up to the sound of folding tables slamming onto Karen's lawn and a speaker system crackling to life like a low-budget concert rehearsal. I peeked through the blinds, and there it was. A full-blown Save the Gardens environmental rally. Karen stood proudly behind a cheap plastic podium, flanked by 2 potted ferns like bodyguards. She wore a white flowy dress, oversized sunglasses, and that classic smug grin that said, "This is my comeback." Dozens of chairs lined her lawn. Half were empty. The rest? Filled with confused retirees sipping lemonade and clearly there for the free snacks. She raised a mic to her lips. Feedback squealed. Then she launched into her speech. Today we take a stand against aggressive watering systems, against backyard bullying, against unjust sprinkler warfare. I almost dropped my coffee. Aggressive watering systems? She sounded like she was testifying before the UN. But then, the real show started. One of the guests, a curious kid in a green shirt, wandered a bit too close to the edge of my property. And the moment his foot grazed the invisible line, whoosh! A sudden burst of mist sprayed his legs, gentle, harmless, but enough to make him yelp. Then, the speakers kicked in. Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries thundered across the yard like we were storming a castle. Gasps. Auntie spilled iced tea. Karen screamed, "Turn it off! He's mocking us!" But it was too late, because that wasn't just a one-time blast. My upgraded sprinkler system had been synced to motion, sound, and music. The moment anyone trespassed, it would trigger a Vegas-level water and audio experience. Streams of water danced in coordination. Opera music soared. A rogue jet arced over the fence and landed, direct hit, right on Karen's podium. The mic sparked, one fern toppled, and Karen, she screamed, slipped, and fell face first into her own banner. It was beautiful. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is this part of the protest?" Another pulled out their phone and whispered, "Oh, this is going viral." And it did. Within 24 hours, the video titled Karen vs. The Sprinkler Symphony, Eco Warrior Edition, hit 500,000 views. Karen's message? Lost. Her sign? Soaked. Her white dress? Now beige with mud. And me? I sat in my gazebo, sipping tea, watching her movement dissolve in a puddle of irony and poorly placed folding chairs. Part 8, the flood defense? And the HOA's final word after Karen's Sprinkler Symphony protest collapsed. Literally, most people would have taken the L and moved on. But not Karen. Oh no. She doubled down. See, after the chaotic spray fest, her lawn was completely saturated. My drainage system? Perfect. Hers? A muddy mess of soggy soil and wounded pride. And then, Mother Nature stepped in. 2 nights later, a heavy rainstorm rolled through. By morning, Karen's entire backyard had become a swamp. Her precious brunch patio, submerged. Her hydrangeas, drowning. And her eco-awareness banner, floating belly up like a soggy napkin in a kiddie pool. But the pièce de résistance? That rickety old fence she'd been repairing with zip ties and hope? Crack! It collapsed like a Jenga tower, right on top of a party tent she'd left up from her protest. Smashed 2 tables, flattened a tray of untouched croissants, and knocked over a lawn flamingo that had seen too much. Karen stood there, mouth agape, garden hose dangling in one hand like she might somehow reverse time with enough water pressure. And then, it happened. The HOA letter. Every single resident got one, typed, official, delivered with surgical precision. It included 2 glorious bullet points. All property lines must be respected. Motion-activated deterrents are legal and supported. And, at the very bottom, any future events that cross into private yards without written consent may result in fines or civil action. No names, no finger-pointing. But we all knew. I watched Karen read it from my window. She held it with shaking hands, eyes darting like she expected the ink to scream, "Gotcha!" in bold letters. For the first time, she looked small. Not defeated, not embarrassed, just drained. Like someone who'd tried to declare war on a sprinkler system and lost to both technology and her own hubris. Part 9. The Comeback Dinner and the Silk Dress Slip. For nearly a week, Karen was quiet. Too quiet. No brunches, no speeches, not even a passive-aggressive flyer taped to the community mailbox. And then she made her move. It started with a white canopy being assembled in her backyard, floral centerpieces, linen-covered tables, wait staff, bustling around with trays of mini quiches. She was hosting a dinner. But not just any dinner. This was a reputation rescue mission. Karen had invited several HOA board members for what she called an appreciation night, which, let's be honest, was code for "Please forget I got soaked twice and went viral." I watched from my porch with a glass of lemonade and the feeling, that delicious instinct, that chaos was inbound. And oh, it was. See what Karen didn't know? That random teenager she'd sent to tamper with my sprinkler system. Yeah, he messed it up. One of the zone settings was still glitched. The sensors weren't off. They were delayed. So while I had reset the core program, one rogue panel was still armed and twitchy. At sunset, just as Karen raised her glass in a cringe-worthy toast to neighborhood unity. The first mist hit, delicate, almost poetic, like the yard was politely warning, "Hey, don't push it." Karen froze. The guests looked up. And then, Wave 2. A full blast erupted over the fence, soaring through the air like judgment itself. Champagne flutes went flying. A server slipped into a tray of lasagna. Karen screamed as a jet of icy water hit her silk dress, which clung to her like it had just signed a non-disclosure agreement. One board member yelled, "Is this a dinner or a baptism?" Another stood calmly under an umbrella and muttered, "Well, that's one way to make a statement." Karen tried to salvage the night, waving her arms, barking orders, shouting something about sabotage, but the grass was slick. The puddle was deep, and when she turned too fast, she slipped. Not a stumble. A full comedic knees-to-sky, arms flailing, dress-poofing flop. The entire tent gasped. Then one person chuckled, then another, and suddenly, the HOA appreciation dinner turned into a neighborhood comedy special. She didn't get back up right away, just lay there, soaked, stunned, mascara bleeding into her lapels, like a garden gnome in exile. The sprinklers hissed to a stop, the music fizzled out, and the only thing left was silence, and a perfectly timed clap of thunder somewhere in the distance. I didn't film it. Didn't need to. At least 5 phones were already capturing the magic. Part 10. The press conference. And the potted plant PR fail. I should have known Karen wouldn't stop there. After being publicly baptized by my sprinkler system, twice, and tumbling face-first into egg salad in front of the HOA board, a normal person might have taken the hint. But not Karen. She didn't just double down. She hosted a press conference in her backyard, with actual houseplants flanking a plastic podium like botanical bodyguards. I blinked, then laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Karen stood tall in a lavender dress, holding a stack of note cards, and began her speech like she was campaigning for HOA President of the Universe. "This," she declared, dramatically waving one hand toward my fence, "is not just a sprinkler system. It is a targeted tool of oppression." I was inside. Watching through the window, Steve curled beside me on the couch, licking his paw with visible disapproval. The cameraman from the local news looked unimpressed. He whispered to one of Karen's guests, "Didn't she throw a wedding in that guy's garden?" The woman shrugged, mouthing, "Kinda." Karen pushed on, arms flailing, pointing toward my gazebo like it had personally insulted her ancestors. "And now," she said, "this hostile irrigation has become a symbol of neighborhood aggression." And then she took one big, theatrical step to her left. Bad move. She didn't realize she was now within range of the one motion sensor I had forgotten to deactivate from the teen tampering incident. It triggered instantly. A glorious, pressure-packed stream of water blasted her square in the chest. Her podium tipped. One potted plant fell over. Her mic shorted out with a fizz and crackle. Karen screamed, flailed backward, and slipped into a flower bed like a soggy garden villain at the end of a low-budget superhero movie. The camera crew kept rolling. One of them laughed out loud. Another whispered, "That's going on air." It did. That evening, the segment aired on local news under the headline, "Garden Drama Erupts into Full-Blown Waterworks War." My name wasn't mentioned. My face wasn't shown. But Karen? She was featured in slow motion, getting soaked, slipping, and collapsing like a wet origami swan 3 times in a 30-second clip. The next morning, Karen tried to post a clarification online, claiming the footage had been manipulated, but no one bought it. Even the HOA released a statement. Motion-activated deterrents are permitted within legal boundaries. All residents are reminded to respect property lines. They didn't name her. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. From that day on, no more brunches, no more speeches, no more save the wetlands signs. Karen had gone silent, but the neighborhood, still giggling. Still sending me memes of Sprinkler Bride and Karen versus the koi pond. Meanwhile, my garden, peaceful again. Just birds, breezes, and perfectly timed sprinklers always ready, just in case. Part 11, The Teen Saboteur and the Lasagna Ambush. For a week, there was silence. No flute music, no passive-aggressive flyers, no Karen peeking through the hedges like a nosy meerkat on a mission. I almost believed it was over. Until I spotted him. A tall, twitchy teenager hanging around the side alley between our houses. He wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big, looked like he ran on energy drinks in spite, and clearly had no clue how to blend in. He kept looking at his phone, then glancing toward my sprinkler control box. Strike 1. The third time I caught him near the panel, I stepped outside, tea in hand, and called out, "Hey, you lost, kid!" He jumped like I'd tasered him with my words. No, I'm just helping someone with yard stuff," he stammered. "Oh yeah?" I raised an eyebrow. "The HOA doesn't allow unregistered helpers. Cameras are up, just FYI. He mumbled something, tripped over his own feet, and bolted like a spooked deer. I checked the sprinkler system immediately. Sure enough, someone had tried to mess with it. The teen hadn't managed to shut it down completely, but he had messed with the calibration. One zone had been set to spray every 20 seconds, no motion required. And I knew exactly who sent him. Karen. She'd gone from yoga cult leader to vigilante saboteur. And now, she was recruiting interns in her war against irrigation. But her plan backfired. Because while I fixed most of the system, one zone, the one closest to her backyard, remained slightly unstable. And that's when the invitations went out. Yep. Karen was throwing a neighborhood appreciation dinner in her backyard, linen-covered tables, catered food, and, of course, a seating chart that just happened to include half the HOA board. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a publicity stunt, a desperate attempt to charm the HOA into forgiving her chaotic past and letting her run the landscaping committee again. I sat on my porch, sipping lemonade, watching it all unfold like a suburban soap opera. At sunset, guests began arriving. Karen wore a pastel dress and a forced smile. She waved like a prom queen on a sinking boat. But what she didn't know was that the sabotaged sprinkler zone, now set on a timer loop, was seconds away from launching a full aquatic assault. It started subtle. A gentle mist drifted over the fence. Light. Harmless. Karen looked up, confused. Then, boom! A full sprinkler cycle erupted, arcing high above the fence line and drenching the entire buffet table. Salads went airborne. A tray of lasagna was obliterated. One caterer screamed and slipped, landing face first in marinara. Guests scattered like pigeons in a thunderstorm. Karen shrieked, flailing with a cloth napkin like it could stop a garden hose. And just when things couldn't get worse, she spun to yell at someone and slipped. Her silk dress ballooned, her arms flailed, and she face-planted into a tray of eclairs. The sprinkler kept going. The crowd, laughing, filming, even the HOA board members were caught trying to stifle grins behind their wine glasses. One of them, Ruth, the queen of HOA sarcasm, leaned to another and muttered, "She invited us to dinner next to a battlefield." What did she expect? By the time the third cycle hit, chairs were collapsing, the centerpiece was floating in a puddle, and Karen? She was sitting in the mud, soaked, speechless, a chocolate eclair stuck to her elbow. It was glorious. I didn't film a thing, but half the neighborhood did. By the next morning, the internet had a new viral sensation. Sprinkler Bride 2, Lasagna Edition. And Karen? She was no longer just a local legend. She was a punchline with a pastry problem. Part 12, the eco-farce, and the soggy stage collapse. Just when I thought the chaos had finally drowned, Karen rose from the soggy ashes like a glitter-drenched phoenix with a grudge. And this time, she came armed with a banner. Saturday morning. I stepped onto my porch to water the succulents and immediately froze. There it was, a massive sign hammered into the ground just outside Karen's fence. "Save the wetlands!" Subtext, in smaller print, raising awareness about illegal backyard flooding and toxic sprinkler misuse. I nearly choked on my coffee. We don't have wetlands. We barely have functional drainage. This wasn't a movement. It was a smear campaign in drag. Out came Karen, flowy white dress, oversized sunglasses, waving to the handful of retirees she'd lured in with promises of lemonade and eco-conscious hors d'oeuvres. She spotted me, gave a smug wave like she was hosting a UN summit, and strutted to the podium, which she'd set up in her yard between two fake potted ferns, like she was about to testify before Congress. She clicked on a speaker. "Good morning, neighbors. Welcome to our first annual Environmental Awareness Day, where we take a stand against water crimes." Water crimes. I had to sit down. Behind her, a local news crew adjusted their camera. They looked mildly annoyed. One of them muttered, "Is this the wetlands thing again?" I didn't interfere. I didn't need to, because Karma had a new assistant. See, I'd recently upgraded the sprinkler system with sound sensors, paired with Bluetooth speakers. The result? A coordinated chaos symphony, and Karen was about to conduct it herself, as she stepped closer to the fence to dramatically point toward my garden. A kid near the crowd, maybe 6 years old, wandered a bit too close to the perimeter. That was the trigger. Whoosh! A cool mist shot up, and simultaneously, Ride of the Valkyries exploded from hidden speakers at full volume. The crowd screamed, drinks went flying. One woman dropped her entire cheese plate and took off sprinting like she'd seen a bear. Karen froze, mid-gesture, arms outstretched, as water misted behind her like a budget Vegas fountain. Then came the second wave, a spray so powerful it hit the Save the Wetlands sign directly in the S, causing it to bend backward and collapse into a folding table. And Karen, she spun to shout something toward the sound system, but slipped in the soaked grass and went down on one knee like she was proposing to the puddle. Her podium wobbled. Her fake plants fell over. The crowd gasped. Then, like the grand finale of a cursed ballet, Karen stood up, flung her arm in the air for one final declaration. and was blasted dead center by a sprinkler jet so strong it launched her wig 3 feet to the left. Someone in the audience snorted so hard they dropped their camera. Karen screamed, "This is a targeted attack. I demand HOA intervention." That's when Ruth, the same HOA board member from the lasagna dinner, spoke up from beneath a very dry umbrella. "Karen, honey, you staged an anti-water protest next to motion-triggered sprinklers." Another sprinkler hissed to life. Karen shrieked again and tried to flee, but not before slipping and crashing into her own lemonade stand. Plastic cups flew, ice hit the pavement, and at least 3 phones caught the entire sequence in slow motion. By sundown, a new video was trending. Eco Karen versus the Sprinkler Symphony caption. "She came for justice. She left soaked in citrus and shame." And me? I didn't even press a button. The system had done it all on its own. The next day, Karen's yard flooded, her patio cracked, her fence collapsed, and the HOA finally stepped in. Not with sympathy, but with a neighborhood-wide letter reminding everyone. Deterrent systems were legal. Property lines were not suggestions, and events crossing boundaries would result in fines and civil claims. It didn't mention Karen by name. It didn't have to. Everyone knew. Part 13. The final dinner disaster, and the HOA's silent verdict. You'd think after a public sprinkler soaking, a viral lemon-drenched meltdown, and a literal backyard collapse, Karen might finally hang up her clipboard. But no. She had one more trick up her waterlogged sleeve, and this time, it involved silk napkins, tiki torches, and a formal dinner meant to reclaim her status in the neighborhood. I first noticed the setup on a Wednesday morning. A giant white canopy was being assembled in Karen's backyard. Tables, chairs, decorative lights, even a catering van. From my porch, lemonade in hand, I squinted and chuckled. She was staging a comeback. The event flyers she'd slipped into mailboxes said, "An elegant evening of appreciation, hosted by Karen, rebuilding community, one plate at a time." I almost RSVP'd, just to see what shade of delusion she'd drape over the evening. But I didn't need to. I had something better. A front row seat from my kitchen window, and a sprinkler system still recovering from the teenage tampering incident. That's right. Her teenage accomplice, the one who had fumbled with my sprinkler box, turns out he messed up just enough to leave the calibration off by a few degrees, meaning the entire fence-adjacent zone was set to mist, not on motion, but on a timer, a perfectly timed delay loop. I had reset most of it, but one panel, one glorious panel, still had a mind of its own. So that evening, just as the sun dipped low and dinner was being served, the backyard air grew heavy. The guests, mostly HOA board members and a few new couples, gathered around the long banquet table, linen tablecloths, candles, laughter. Karen stood at the head in a pastel gown, doing her best mother of the HOA impression. She raised a glass. "To new beginnings and better understanding." Someone clapped, someone toasted, and then, splat. A mist, faint at first, rolled in across the fence line. Then a sudden peffaft erupted from a side nozzle, spraying diagonally across the buffet. Plates clattered, shrieks echoed. One of the servers slipped, face-planting into a tray of lasagna. Karen screamed, holding her wine glass like a torch. Her silk dress, immediately see-through. Her centerpieces, drenched. Her reputation, about to be soaked beyond recognition. She tried to salvage it. "Please, everyone, it's just a malfunction, a little—" Another burst. This time, from the backup nozzle I'd installed under a camouflaged rock. It caught Karen square in the chest. She gasped, twirled in place, and slipped again into the decorative pond she'd tried to copy from my side of the fence. Her guests gasped. 2 phones came out. One board member whispered, "This is why we have bylaws." The music shorted. The candles sputtered. And then, total silence, except for the faint drip, drip, drip of Karen's ruined centerpiece sliding off the table. By the next morning, another video surfaced. Sprinkler Bride, the sequel. Karen flailing in her soaked dress, falling into the pond. Again. Views? 600,000 in 48 hours. The HOA didn't issue a formal statement. They didn't have to. But Karen's request to co-chair the landscaping committee? Silently denied. And me? I watered my roses, patted Steve on the head, and whispered, "We don't raise our voices here, we just raise the water pressure." Part 14. The flooded crawl space and the quiet resignation. You'd think a soaked lasagna, a ruined silk dress, and a pond plunge in front of HOA board members would be enough to end Karen's campaign of chaos. But if Karen had anything, it was denial, served with a side of delusion. The day after the dinner disaster, a plumber's van pulled into her driveway, then a contractor, then another van with the words "Foundation Repair Specialists" on the side. Apparently, that sprinkler sabotage dinner party, combined with weeks of overwatering, poor drainage, and multiple collapses, had done more than just humiliate her. Her crawl space? Flooded. Her foundation? Cracked. Her patio? Sinking. Like her credibility. I watched from my porch, sipping hot tea while Steve basked beside me in the morning sun. Karen paced in her backyard, phone in one hand, garden hose in the other. As if somehow she could rinse away 1,000 gallons of bad decisions. She looked smaller now. Not physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. Like someone who had finally run out of flags to wave and fences to cross. No more flyers. No more brunches. No more passive-aggressive sidewalk greetings. It was quiet. Peaceful. Too peaceful. That afternoon, a white SUV pulled into her driveway and stayed for 3 hours. A man in a suit came and went, carrying a leather binder. The next day, a sign appeared on her lawn. Big, bold letters. For sale. With a desperate little red sticker. Motivated seller. No farewell party, no apology, not even a goodbye. She vanished from the neighborhood group chat. Her Facebook went silent. The porch lights never came back on, but she did leave one final offering. A floral greeting card. No envelope name. But the handwriting was unmistakable. I opened it over the kitchen counter. Steve perched beside me, tail flicking. Inside, "I hope you enjoy your peace now. I'm moving somewhere that appreciates shared spaces. Good luck with your hoses." I read it twice, then slid it directly into the compost bin. Steve meowed, like he approved. The next weekend, word had spread. Karen was gone. Neighbors nodded at each other knowingly. No one asked why. No one needed to. The chaos had finally evaporated. And in its place, just misty silence, lush green peace, and a garden that had bloomed not just from water, but from boundaries held firm. Part 15. Sprinkler Commander, and the garden that won the war. A week after Karen's for sale sign went up, a letter landed in every mailbox on our street. It was from Ruth, the HOA board member with the dry wit and sharper eyes, a neighborhood newsletter. Inside, community updates, safety reminders, lawn trimming guidelines, and at the bottom, a curious little line that made me choke on my tea. We are also proud to welcome our newest vice president, whose efforts to maintain property integrity and peaceful gardening have set a high standard. Congratulations to our very own sprinkler commander. I nearly spit tea across the cat. They never even asked. Apparently, the vote was unanimous, based on nothing but footage, feedback, and one very dramatic dinner party. I thought about declining. Leadership was never my thing. I didn't want meetings. I wanted marigolds. But then, I realized something. Maybe the HOA didn't need another power-hungry clipboard queen. Maybe it needed someone who valued peace, who believed in gardens, not gossip. So I accepted. Quietly. Without a speech, without a banner. Just me, Steve, and a sprinkler system that could launch water farther than Karen could throw blame. Karen's house sold quickly, to a quiet couple in their 40s who worked from home and brought cookies to introduce themselves. They'd heard about the garden. They even asked, sheepishly, "Are the sprinklers still armed?" I handed them a laminated map of the perimeter and said, "Only if someone forgets to knock." They laughed. No tension, no red flags, just new neighbors. The good kind. A month later, I got an email from a small video production team. They'd seen the viral clips. Suburban Soaker, Sprinkler Bride, and HOA Karen versus the Water Symphony. They wanted to do a feature. I said yes, on one condition. No mention of Karen's name. They agreed. The short documentary aired under the title, Suburban Legends, The Man Who Turned Sprinklers into Justice. It was funny, lighthearted. They recreated scenes with cardboard props, dramatic music, and a kid in a glitter wig playing Karen. People loved it. But more importantly, it gave my garden a new story, not a story of war, but of restoration. Now the lavender is thriving. The koi are lazier than ever. Steve naps in the gazebo like royalty. And me? I walk my garden paths like a man who defended a kingdom, not with anger, but with wires, water, and patience. The sprinklers? Still perfectly timed, still ready, just in case. But they haven't fired in weeks. Because sometimes, when you stand your ground, even chaos learns to stay on its side of the fence. And on one quiet night, just before I turned in, I gave Steve a soft pat and whispered, "We didn't just protect a yard, we defended peace." He blinked slowly, then curled up under the string lights as the garden exhaled, and for the first time in months, I did too.